Hey everyone, Charlene here from the Honeybee Stamps design team. I'm so excited. This is my first video I'm sharing with you here on the channel. Today I'm going to show you how to use alcohol inks with your die cuts. We are using the Lovely Layers Water Lily. This is such a beautiful die set. And I'm going to start out by cutting everything from Yupo paper. Yupo paper works really well with your alcohol inks. It is a synthetic paper. It is non-porous, which means that your inks are more easily able to move around on the paper. So I'm starting out here with two different kinds of alcohol inks. I have just regular alcohol ink, and then I have alcohol ink Pearl. The ink color is Fiesta and the pearl color is Enchanted. All of this information will be down below in the description box as well. So you can see I'm using a mini applicator tool, and then I am using the corresponding applicator felt circles. These work really well with alcohol inks. So you just apply 2 to 3 colors of alcohol inks to the felt, and then you put some of the alcohol ink blending solution, which is what I just added, and then you tap this all over the top of your Yupo paper. So this is going to give you a really nice base layer of alcohol inks. So you can see I have 3 of the die cuts from the Water Lily set. I tend to work in groups, otherwise you can get kind of messy and overwhelming when you're working with your die cuts. So I've chosen these 3 to start with. Once I have that base application, I'm going to take some of the blending solution and I'm just going to drip it over the top. And then I'm going to use this blower tool to move those inks around and have them blend together. While blending solution does contain rubbing alcohol, it is a little bit different because of its added ingredients. It has glycerin as well as other chemicals which slow the drying process. Because it slows the drying period, it gives the inks more time to blend together. Rubbing alcohol, otherwise known as isopropyl alcohol, on the other hand, tends to evaporate very quickly. And so what it does when you add it to your alcohol inks is it tends to create white spaces because it is pushing out those alcohol inks, and then it dries very quickly, so the alcohol inks don't have as much time to blend together. So by using blending solution and then separately using isopropyl alcohol, you're able to get different results. I like to alternate between using the blending solution and the rubbing alcohol, and I do that until I'm happy with the blend that I have on my Yupo paper. You do want to use an isopropyl alcohol that has a 90% or higher concentration of alcohol. The other percentage in those rubbing alcohols is water. So if you use anything less than 90%, you're not going to get the same results. Because you're working with die cuts, the alcohol inks that you're blowing off of the edges of the die cut does tend to seep underneath the Yupo paper. So I like to set my die cuts on a paper towel to dry thoroughly. I went ahead and finished all of the pieces that I'm doing in pinks, which is the large floral water lily as well as the smaller bud water lily. To clean my work surface, I just sprayed some rubbing alcohol on my work surface and wiped it off with a paper towel. I do recommend using some type of glass mat or craft mat for this type of project so that the rubbing alcohol will clean off your surface thoroughly. For the remaining die cuts, which are the lily pad, the stem, as well as the leaves that go underneath the water lily bud, I'm using some greens. I am using Mojito alcohol ink, and then I'm using Sublime Pearl alcohol ink. I'm doing the same process that I did with the flower and the bud. If you're wondering what the difference is between alcohol ink and alcohol ink pearl, the pearl has a shimmery finish. So if you're mixing regular alcohol inks with pearl alcohol inks, your finished project is going to have shimmer in different areas depending on how that pearl color has blended in with your regular alcohol ink. The isopropyl alcohol that I'm using is in a spray bottle, but a lot of people prefer to put it into a dropper bottle and then use it to drop on top of your Yupo paper. So keep that in mind when you're trying to figure out how you prefer to use these items. For the inside pieces of the water lily, I'm not using any blending solution or rubbing alcohol. I'm just doing a consistent bit of ink on the two separate pieces. I'm doing one piece here in sienna alcohol ink, and then the top layer, which is kind of the accent layer to the middle part, I'm using some sunshine yellow. Now that everything is colored, we can go ahead and glue everything together. I like to line up all my pieces in order of layers. I also tend to only glue towards the center of the florals. That way, if I ultimately decide to pop up any of the petals to give it a more 3D look, I can go in along the edges and add some adhesive foam squares. Something to keep in mind when you're working with Yupo paper, because it is synthetic and very slick, when you add any glue to it, it's going to take a while for the glue to dry. So you don't need a lot of glue, number one, because it's not going to get absorbed into the paper. And number two, you have a lot of wiggle room time, so you can go ahead, layer everything up, and then kind of work it all together to make sure it's put together well. Now, if you don't want to wait for the glue to dry, you absolutely could use some double-sided tape and just put a small piece towards the center of each die cut, and that would actually work really well, and it would take out the dry time from the process altogether. Honeybee Stamps does have a very thorough layering guide available on their website for this set, as well as their other honey cut sets. It's awesome. For my final piece here, I am popping it up with a bit of adhesive foam because I want that middle inset piece with the sienna and sunshine yellow. I wanted that to look like it was set farther back inside the flower. So now here I've repeated the process, put the bud together, and I am coming in now and adding the little accent pieces to the leaves. This does not take very much glue at all, and if you're going to add any of these tiny detail layers, I absolutely recommend working with a jewel picker. For my sentiment, I'm using the Mini Messages 6x6 stamp set, and I am using the Mini Messages banners. These cut out the sentiments perfectly, and I love that they have different edges. So some have a fishtail, some are squared, and then some are a rounded square. It's great because you can pick based on whatever card you're using. I am going to be heat embossing my stamped sentiment, so I did go ahead and put down some anti-static powder tool, and then I used some clear embossing ink and stamped that on top using my stamp wheel. And now I'm adding some white embossing powder and then melting it with my heat tool. I love the look of white embossing powder on black cardstock, so I tend to use that quite a bit for my sentiments. But now that everything is ready, I can go ahead and put my card together. I'm starting out by gluing the large water lily to the lily pad before I glue the entire thing to my card base. This gives me a bit more control in deciding how much of that lily pad is going to be showing behind the water lily. And then I can go ahead and go in and glue down my stem as well as the water lily bud. Now again, like I said before, because it is Yupo paper, you've got to keep in mind that these things need some dry time. I did off camera go ahead and place an acrylic block over the entire card and let it sit for a few minutes while the glue dried before I moved on to the next step. Since this is a fairly clean and simple card, I tend to add splatter to these types of cards just to break up all of that white background. So I'm actually using some of the gold alcohol ink mixative, and I've just dropped a little bit there on my glass mat, and I've added some rubbing alcohol to dilute it. I do recommend cleaning your brush pretty quickly afterwards with rubbing alcohol if you're going to use that mixative in that way. And then all I have to do is add my sentiment, and that finishes off my card. I love, love, love all the shimmer from the pearls as well as those white tips on the petals of the florals. I think this looks awesome. I hope you guys will try this technique. I hope you picked up some tips and tricks. Please be sure to like and subscribe, as well as hit the notification bell so that you'll know about future videos on the channel. Have a great day.